My friends at Easy Cater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Taylor with today's leadership quote, which comes from an unknown author. The same boiling water that softens the potato hardens the egg. It's about what you're made of, not the circumstances.
The Leader Assistant podcast exists to encourage and challenge assistants to become confident, game-changing leader assistants.
Hi, it's episode 50. Thank you so much for listening all around the world.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's episode 50. I'm very, very excited to have hit the 50, the big 50 mark of the podcast. So thanks again for your support, for your reviews, for listening, for sharing with your friends and with your fellow assistants. It's been a fun ride, and I've got about 50 more interviews already recorded, ready to schedule out for the next year. So we're going to jump into episode 50 in just a second. But before we jump into the interview, wanted to take a quick second and tell you about Savoya. Savoya provides best-in-class executive black car service, and they're purpose-built to support today's executive assistant. They know the changes to your executive's schedule disrupt their flow and disrupt your flow and set off a flurry of activity in your schedule. And that's why they've created solutions that keep everyone seamlessly connected from booking to final destination and beyond. Because ever-changing plans are a big deal. But your executive doesn't have to know that. Go to savoya.com/leader assistant or call 866-916-3081 to learn more about how Savoya can help you get your executive where they need to get with ground transportation needs in a secure, reliable fashion. Again, savoya.com/leader assistant. SAVOYA.com/leader assistant. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Leader Assistant podcast. Today's guest is Lindsay Taylor from Your Excellency Limited. Lindsay, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So let's talk a little bit about your very first job. What was your first job and what did you learn in that role that you still use today?
Okay, so my first job was as a personal assistant, PA to a sales director. I was fresh out of college. I had loads of energy, loads of enthusiasm, and I was really excited about entering the world of work. It was many moons ago, back in 1990, which makes me feel quite old, particularly as I've just spent the last couple of days celebrating my son's 21st as well. So again, feeling very old, Jeremy. So what I learned in that role probably were lots of things that I still use today. Probably the most useful, I suppose, was the realization that when you're new to something, you're inevitably going to be slower at it. I'm a huge perfectionist, and I want to be fantastic and brilliant at everything right from the word go, which I know isn't humanly possible. And I read a really lovely quote the other day, which was went something like, allow yourself to be a beginner. No one starts off by being excellent. So I know when I started my first role, I wanted to be excellent right from the word go. I wanted to be able to add real value to the organisation and also working in partnership with my director. So I had loads of energy, but obviously I was on that steep learning curve there, and I think you are slower as you're becoming more experienced. So I think what I've learned from that as well now is obviously as a learning and development specialist, if you're aware of the competency learning ladder and the fact that you are going to progress through different stages of know-how, I think that can take the pressure off sometimes when you're in new, unfamiliar situations and environments and situations and scenarios. So I think that's a really great thing to to be aware of, that competency learning ladder. We can't all be perfectionists right from the word go, much as I'm actually giving myself advice here, Jeremy, not to everyone else as well. So, yeah, I'd love to kind of signpost everyone to an article that I recently wrote. It's on my LinkedIn page as well, and it was an article and a blog post for the new wave of EAs and PAs based on my learning over the last however many years of my career, because I think hindsight's a really great thing. And actually, if I had had this advice when I was younger, it would have been a real help, I think. So that was a long-winded answer. I've got a lot to say, Jeremy. You'll get that through this interview.
So you started your career off as a PA. How did that happen, or why did you become a PA?
So I suppose I kind of thought that I had the skills at the young age of 18 to actually be a really great PA. You know, I had really great organisation skills. I lived all over the world because my father was in the British forces here. And I think being able to, I travelled a lot, and being able to very quickly take stock of new situations, new environments, and being able to connect with people. I think I was quite a mature character at 18, and I was really good at creating those connections already. So combining that with my organisational skills, I thought that the PA role was going to be perfect. And actually, I really loved what I did as a PA. So, and on the whole travel note as well, the fact that I've travelled a lot, I do think travel is one of the best educators in the world as well. It's one of my absolute passions, travelling.
So you were a PA, so talk to us a little bit about the difference between a PA and an EA, in your context versus, in the United States.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a really emotive question, actually, a really interesting question, because I think at last count there were over 160 different titles for the role of the PA, EA, office manager, admin assistant, whatever you want to call it. And I think that really differs between, as you say, countries and between organizations. So generally, for me, a PA is working at maybe a less senior level to an EA here in the UK, an executive assistant. However, I think we need a new way maybe of devising what these different roles are, maybe based on the complexity of the work that you're doing, rather than everyone getting really hung up about the title that they hold. I always say that for some of my coachees that I work with that are maybe applying for new positions, you know what, look past the actual job title and really read and understand and comprehend what is being asked of you in that role, because the title may not be as fancy, with kind of lights around it as you maybe would like, but actually the role is a really great senior role, and maybe one doesn't quite match the other. So it's a really interesting question, really interesting.
So do you have any crazy stories about your time as a PA?
Do you know what? I would love to say that I had some really crazy stories and I could wow you with them, but I don't. I think the only thing that really comes to mind, and it's not that crazy, but I worked as an EA for Transamerica, and actually relocated with them out to Chicago. And I had the opportunity to visit, we used to travel a lot there as well, to visit San Francisco. So I did kind of connect with one of the EAs that was working there at the time, and I was able to go right up to the pinnacle of that iconic pyramid building and actually go and see there's a boardroom right on the very top floor, which was just amazing, absolutely amazing. It's not crazy, but it was a great memory.
Yeah, fun experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what was the biggest mistake you made as an assistant, and what did you learn from it?
So I don't think one big blooper or mistake that I can really pinpoint. It was probably lots of little mistakes that really, I think if you take them in the right way, they're all kind of learning opportunities for you. So maybe the one mistake, so to speak, that I was probably guilty of was probably not maintaining my work boundaries as well as I could when I first started out as a PA and EA. And I know lots of you in this profession are guilty of that also. Because we're in roles where we're supporting teams, where we're supporting and working with our executives, it can be very easy to say yes to every request of your time and energy. And I think, we're not being helpful to ourselves or to anyone else if we're always saying yes. There are going to be team members that will take advantage of that, and you're going to be asked weird and wonderful requests of your time and energy. And I think we need to be absolutely clear about where we're adding the most value in our teams and our organizations, and really be able to say no in a helpful, credible, professional way, where we're still providing solutions and maybe signposting someone to an alternative suggestion rather than taking all of that work on ourselves. And that's probably my main learning when I first started out as a PA. I did say yes all the time. I did end up working all hours God send sometimes as well. So again, if I could signpost people to an article that I wrote actually for Lucy Brazier's magazine, Executive Secretary magazine, I'll make sure you have the link through to that on different ways of being able to say no. It's such an important skill to have.
Yeah, what's one of those ways?
So one of the ways is really being able to find alternative solutions. So again, being polite, being credible, being professional, and saying, thanks very much for asking me this. I do believe that, say, Bill in accounts will be much better placed to be able to help you with this. That's his specialism. Let me know how you get on talking to him. And, that's really helpful. That's not saying no, can't do it, and not giving someone a different suggestion. It's actually making sure that you are assigning the role or the thing that's been asked of you to the person that is actually there to do that role, that has that expertise and that specialism.
That's great. So when you said you worked a lot of hours, and you kind of, what was the turning moment or the turning point for you noticing that you were saying yes too much and that you needed to stop?
So I suppose it was when I left my first position. We actually then moved to Chicago, and I think when I worked in America, it was a very different environment. One, because of course everyone loved the fact that I spoke the Queen's English and have an English accent. But two, I think because I was there, yes, I was there to work and I did give my all, but also I was there as well, and I was wanting to experience a different culture, and there is a difference in culture between Americans and the UK. And I suppose I took the pressure off myself a little, and actually Transamerica in Chicago did have a different almost work ethic that I think they were perhaps a bit stricter on the fact that, this is the time that we finish. Inevitably, there are going to be projects where you're working overtime, but really everybody had, I think at that time, a much better balance, so to speak, between ensuring that yes, they're working hard, but also we're out playing hard as well, and socializing and enjoying the fact that you're alive, really, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good. So let's transition and talk about executives for a second. What's one tip you would give executives to help them get more out of their assistant?
So I suppose the one tip would be to really get to know and understand your assistant. And this is two ways as well. I think the very best assistant and executive partnerships and working relationships are going to be cemented in that whole kind of respect and trust. And that comes, I think, from that open, honest communication and really understanding how each other ticks, what's important to each other, what your personality, how you like to communicate best, all of those things that really help you work together and gel together much better. So it's get to know each other, if I can make that a two-way thing rather than just the executive finding out about the assistant. The assistant absolutely needs to know how best to work with the executive too.
Yeah. What's something you would tell someone who's considering becoming an assistant? Oh,
gosh, I would say do do lots of research on the resources that are available for you out there, because there is a vast amount of information and know-how. And I always say that the kind of admin community is a real community, and I use that word because we're all very much looking out for each other. You can reach out to different people, you can contact different people to ask different questions. There are lots of different networking groups out there across the world as well. So network. Use the resources there, because we are a real community. There's lots of people that want to help you.
That's great. So what's a tip for maybe one quick tip for networking with other assistants?
Okay, so again, I'm going to signpost you to another article that I write. I like writing. You probably get that from this podcast as well, Jeremy. So I wrote an article again for Executive Secretary magazine called The Hello Strategy to Networking, which were sort of top tips on how to best network, particularly for the PA, EA, admin professional. Now, Hello is an acronym, just to give you a background to it. Hello is an acronym, and the H stands for honesty, the E for engaged and engaging, the L for learning, the next L for look interested, and the O is for outcomes. And I'm going to hone in on that first letter, the H, which is honesty. And I think for lots of people, when you are networking, and if we're talking about that face-to-face networking as well, if we're honest with ourselves, that can very often be something that's outside of our comfort zone, that makes us feel that those butterflies in our stomach or whatever. If we're arriving into a room where we don't know many other people and we want to network, actually taking ownership of the fact and being honest with yourself that you do feel outside of your comfort zone here is a really good thing to do, because if we use that as our leveler and our foundation, we can then kind of apply different strategies that will help us feel less out of our comfort zone. And actually, there's that real sort of inclusivity when we admit that we're maybe feeling outside of our comfort zone, that actually lots of other people are as well, and it kind of gives that better connection with others too. You know what, we're being honest here, and actually it's okay to have these feelings. We're emotive creatures. So that would be my advice on face-to-face networking in particular.
That's great.
Yeah, I suppose on the networking, if you're going to use some of these resources to maybe network, say on LinkedIn or some of the other platforms that you can use, one of the great resources I would recommend, again, going back to Executive Secretary magazine, is they have a tab on their website which is for associations, and that lists all the global associations, the associations across the world that will support you as a PA, EA, and admin professional. Just brilliant, as a starting resource for you.
Awesome. That's very helpful. Thank you. So is there something assistants should do when they feel undervalued or they feel they aren't being recognized or respected?
Absolutely. I think it needs. If you undervalued undervalued or you're not feeling respected, I suppose for some PAs and EAs, they may think, it's going to get better over time. And actually, if it doesn't, then that can then build up and become a real problem and challenge for them. So I think right from the word go, we do need to do something about it. Now, the best thing I would say to do would be to talk to your executive or talk to someone else in the team and actually voice your concerns. Again, we're emotive creatures. It's all right to feel this, be open and honest, but have examples ready as to your reasons for feeling that. As a coach, if a coachee came to me and said to me, I'm feeling undervalued, I don't feel respected in the workplace, straight away I would say to them, so what tells you that? What evidence do you have? Because you need to better understand where your concerns are actually coming from. And I had a PA coachee who recently told me that she wasn't feeling valued. And actually, when we sat down together and I really understood a bit more about the situation, it was really interesting when we discovered that her and her executive were very different characters and they liked to work in a very different way. So she wasn't necessarily getting the kind of recognition that she needed to kind of satisfy her, the way that she was motivated from her manager, because he was a very different character to her. So I'm going to signpost you to another article now, Jeremy. There's one that I wrote that's called Why You're Not Getting the Recognition You Deserve and What to Do About It. And it introduces you to two different kind of personality traits, one of which is something called internally referenced, where we set the motivational standard from within, and we don't necessarily need that praise and recognition from the external outside world. And then the other personality kind of character trait is what we call externally referenced, where in order to feel motivated and to feel valued, we need that external reference, that motivation, that feedback from the people that we're working with, from the external outside world. And what was happening in the situation with my PA coachee was she was externally referenced, so needed that kind of that feedback to legitimize that she was doing a great job, or you know what, she could do a little bit better next time. And she wasn't getting it because the manager she was working with was actually internally referenced. And if you're internally referenced, inside you're probably thinking, you know what, why do people need to tell me I'm doing a good job? Because I know I'm doing it. You know what, I've set that standard within myself. And it's a really interesting dynamic if that's going on in your kind of executive admin relationship there. Really insightful to understand different personalities and the way that we're made up, you know, the way that we tick.
Yeah, that's very helpful. That's awesome. So on the flip side, how can we help executives, HR departments, recruiters, and others in the organizations value the role of an assistant?
So I think it's educating or even re-educating these executives, our HR departments, as to actually what the role absolutely entails, what value our administratives and EAs and PAs are actually adding to the organization. And they are adding value. I know it's a hard thing to kind of quantify, but actually the bottom line is, you know what, if the EA, PA, the admin professional is supporting their executive, it's freeing up the executive's time to work on other things that are more important to them. And actually, bottom line is, it is saving the executive and the organization money. You know what, at the end of the day, it very often comes down to financials, and that is the bottom line, you know.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about communication. So you talk about how important our choice of words is, and I'm actually interviewing another guest soon on kind of how we listen and this thing called listening intelligence.
Okay.
And so I would love to hear your thoughts on the other side about how we talk and how our choice of words have an impact on those around us.
Absolutely. So, yeah, one of the kind of learning areas that I love to share with PAs and executives, actually, is around kind of the magic of words, and the fact that our choice of words can really impact on motivation, on inspiration for ourselves and for others. Our choice of words can have just a massive impact there. And actually, what I tend to share is if we break down our words, we can break them down into, I suppose, two different kind of personality styles. So one extreme, we would have something called away from language or away from thinking. So and the other extreme, we would have what we call towards language and towards thinking. So our towards thinking and our towards language is really motivational, and it adds sort of a lot of energy and momentum there. So we'll use words like I will, I can. It's all about kind of solutions and the things that you get, you gain, achieve. As opposed to our away from language, which is sort of the flip side of that, which is I can't do. It's concentrating on the problems. I won't do. You don't want to do this. And it's a very different language set, which of course can impact the way your message and your communication is received, because it doesn't have that same forwards momentum there. And I use the analogy with A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh book, The Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which I hope everyone listening has read this. If you haven't read it as an adult, read A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh, because it is hugely insightful as to different characters and behaviors. An analogy for our kind of away from language and away from thinkers would be Eeyore, the kind of doom and gloom, the fact that the donkey has a little cloud above his head, that his bow's fallen off his tail. And if we're working in an environment, or we ourselves are always Eeyores, it can actually be quite draining and demotivational, as opposed to our analogy with these towards thinkers and towards characters, which would, of course, be Eeyore with all of that bounce and that energy and that forward momentum.
You mean Tigger?
I do mean Tigger. Who did I say?
You said Eeyore.
Did I say Eeyore
Yeah.
again? Oh, I need stronger coffee, I think, Jeremy.
That's all right.
Yes, sorry, Tigger. I'm glad you picked up on that. So Tigger with all of that bouncy energy there. So, and that's going to add much more enthusiasm and motivation to the language that we use there. And I'm not saying, that we need to be Tiggers all of the time, because that would be absolutely exhausting, because I've said we're emotive creatures and it's not possible to keep that positive energy going 24/7. But actually, if we can make a conscious effort of amending our language so that we are adding that motivation and that optimism sometimes and that positivity to it, then that can really motivate both ourselves and those that we're working with as well. Thanks for picking up on that.
Yeah. I was listening.
I know, I'm impressed, especially as it's early morning for you and I think you're still having your breakfast.
So if you could snap your fingers and instantly give all assistants more of something, what would it be?
Oh, okay. So snap my fingers, magic, assistance over the world. You know what? I would probably say you need to believe in yourself. I would like to give you that instant realization that the work you're doing, yes, is diverse, it's vast, but you are adding huge value to the lives of your executives and to the success of your organization. So it would absolutely be that. It would be believe in yourself, and also I suppose the networking as well. I think you should be exposing yourself and actually be able to network a lot more, whether that is that face-to-face networking or whether it's using all of the different online platforms that we can use to connect with our peers and with others as well. So
awesome. Well, we're going to wrap things up with the final question. What makes an assistant a leader?
Oh, gosh, you do ask some hard questions there, Jeremy. Okay, what makes an assistant a leader? I think the actual nature of the role, the fact that an assistant is very often that person who is being the Tigger, who is keeping everyone motivated and positive and inspired, means that they are leaders, within their own right. There's a lovely quote. I hope I'm getting this right. It's John Quincy Adams, who was the 6th American president, if I've got that right. And he said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. Now, I think lots of assistants could step in and say, absolutely, I help others learn more, I help them do more, I help them become more. I inspire them, because we're very often those that are kind of doing the whole inclusivity thing, that we're involving everybody, that we're making sure that everyone is motivated within our team. So absolutely, we're leaders.
So that's awesome. So I want to do a follow-up to that. So what if your personality bent is more towards Eeyore, or you're more introverted and reserved? How do you kind of bring that positivity and that maybe extrovertedness, if you will, when it really, really drains you as an introvert?
Okay, so I would then say, does it drain you as an introvert? Because okay, well, we could digress on this one. I think recognizing, if we kind of step back here, recognizing that maybe it's not a natural way for you to communicate, that you're not doing the whole Tigger enthusiastic language, and that you're not kind of being that extrovert, is your kind of first step to being able to make some changes that are going to add more benefit. And absolutely, if you are having to work at being more extrovert and including more of this inspirational, motivational language, then I suppose it can be tiring. But actually, it's going back to that competency learning ladder, isn't it? If we're able to be flexible, if we're able to try things in a different way, we know it's going to feel a little bit odd to start with. And actually, we're at the bottom rung of our competency learning ladder. But as we move up and we're putting it into practice more often, actually, whilst it may not be the core of ourselves, actually it's going to feel a lot more natural to be able to step into being more Tigger-like and more inspirational and empowering, because of course it's going to help ourselves as well as others. So yeah, first step is recognizing that maybe it's not your natural tendency, but then giving it a go, being flexible, recognizing that you're not going to be excellent right from the words go. We're going back to my perfectionist thing right at the beginning of this interview. And then recognizing that there are huge benefits to you putting this into practice as well. Does that help? I'm really interested actually, Jeremy, on it's exhausting doing that. I need to do some more research on that.
Well, the reason I ask, that is helpful. I think that's a good way to put it. The reason I ask is because I am an introvert, and it took me a long time to, and a lot of practice, like you said. We got to just kind of put ourselves out there and keep working on it. It took me a long time to get more comfortable in the outgoing Tigger-like environment, and so anyway, and even with today's open office culture, the office environment is built for extroverts, and so it often can feel draining in general, just going to the office. So I just practiced it, and now I'm a lot more comfortable. But
which you've said you've put this into practice, and it does become more comfortable because it then becomes easier to practice because you're doing it more often. And actually, the other thing that I think is really important is going back to that H for honesty thing, is actually taking ownership of the fact that, you know what, this isn't my natural core being, that I'm extrovert. I am having to work at this and put this into practice, but sharing that with people as well, because I think the more that we are open and honest in our communication and share that, it's going back to our different personalities. If you're introverts, share that with someone. What's there can only be good in that people are then going to understand more about maybe what's going on for you inside, rather than them guessing that you're an extrovert. You're not actually. You're really trying at this, and actually you don't find it comes naturally maybe. So honesty, back to honesty, open communication.
Yeah, and that's there's kind of a running joke. We're getting ready to move offices, and the running joke is whenever we see a closet or a dark corner, we're like, oh, there's Jeremy's office. oh, Jeremy. But yeah,
it's a bit Harry Potter-like. You're going to go in the cupboard under the stairs.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, though, too, to wrap this point up, is part of the reason that I'm able to do it now is I have to be very intentional about my time off, and when I take time off, I have to make sure that I don't spend it all with people, like being very extroverted the whole time. Yeah. Because then I come back to work and I have nothing left, and so I just have to make sure I get that quiet time and solitude. So.
Absolutely, and I think that's important for anybody, irrespective of their personality. That's what I would call kind of me time, and making sure that you're having whatever you need to kind of maintain that, what I would call your equilibrium, whatever that is. Whether it's, for me, it's even just sitting in the garden reading a magazine in the sunshine, or we have chickens in the garden, or going to talk to the chickens. They're very good listeners. Whatever that is, I think it's very important that you recognise that you need that for your own self-preservation, really.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Lindsay, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to chat with us. What's something we can do to support you, and where can we find you online?
Okay, so online, predominantly, I use LinkedIn as my preferred social media platform. So feel free to connect with me. Anyone that's listening, just add a little note on your invitation to say that you've heard of this podcast. You can find out more about what we do. You can go on our website, which is www.yourexcellency.co.uk. We've got a menu of learning there, which details everything that we do. You can tell I'm very chatty. I'm incredibly responsive by email. So that's lindsay@yourexcellency.co.uk. Or you can give me a phone call and I'll make sure my number's on all of your links and things that you're going to share, Jeremy. So just connect with me, absolutely connect with me. And if anyone ever needs any assistance or help, you know what, I'd be absolutely delighted to help.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll put all that in the show notes so people can find you easily. And thanks again for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks again for listening, and thank you, Lindsay, for sharing your story and your tips and wisdom. You can check out links to connect with Lindsay on the show notes at leaderassistant.com/50, leaderassistant.com/50. Also, don't forget to check out our sponsor, Savoya, at savoya.com/leaderassistant.
Please review on Apple Podcasts. GoBulls.com